I'm with one of our bloggers here at the event, Eli Stefanski. Eli, welcome. I'm curious what you've seen so far. What is the thing that sort of has surprised you the most? Like, is there something you heard that you said, wow, that's like really cool or actually very insightful and different than you expected?
I was really intrigued actually with the notions around trust and social and ethics that actually came out of Dassault CEO Bernard Charlet. And so I'm really looking forward to talking with him further about his notions around building a company around that is built around sustainability and collaboration and some very social conditions.
Can you say a little bit about how what you've seen here fits in specifically with that? Are there particular things like, the technologies that we're listening to and hearing about, we think about more on a product level, not a business model level, but there's some really interesting implications.
There are indeed, and we'd like to, there's a lot of great innovation that's going on right now in the product spheres and a lot of systems that are actually set up around that. What we know about business model innovation is that, no business plan, no great product is actually going to do it, but you really need a great business model to support it. And it's a lot of the same principles and a lot of the same tools that we see applied to product innovation when it relates to business model innovation. So looking at the overall complexity in terms of, how does this product actually meet, a particular need for your customers. There was a really great, very simplistic tweet that came out this morning that was saying that, a great product is one that serves a customer's needs. And that's really sort of around the business model implementation. It's around the customer segment and the value proposition that it's going to give to that segment, and then sort of, obviously the revenue streams and the cost structure that support that. But really, it's a lot of the same complexity that goes into the product innovation.
So when it comes to innovating around a product and getting customer input, one of the things which I've observed is in many cases what happens in the virtual world or even in initial tests and pilots doesn't necessarily map to the real world. Well-worn example is New Coke. The product could be the best product in the world, but there were some implicit biases or beliefs that people had that stopped them from wanting to buy the product. What are your thoughts on this, and how can these tools be used to overcome that, or are other things that need to be done to complement the technology?
I think that there were two really interesting things that came out of today's section. One was Monica talking about the decisions that are actually made in this store, and to some extent, it's those implicit, how hungry you are, is going to determine what you are willing to buy and what you're not willing to buy. And there are all these funny studies that have been done to look at that. And Monica was talking about how 85% of all decisions are actually made in the store in the moment, and so really looking at, from a retail perspective and a retail industry perspective, how do you actually create some real understanding of the customer and how they make those decisions through some of these same technologies that are at play in sort of the actual sort of modeling of the product itself. So, how do you actually bring that experience of co-creating and understanding the product into the store itself and into the buying decision? So I thought that was really interesting. And related to that, we're seeing a lot around co-creation. And so the role that the customer is actually playing in the design and in the buying of the product. So World Blue is a great example of that in terms of people using, being in the comfort of their own home, basically co-creating the house that they want to live in. And so that the way in which these technologies are being used to crowdsource the product requirements and sort of the product experience are sort of ways in which I think we're doing workarounds to those quirky ways in which consumers behave.
What is the one question that hasn't been answered yet that you hope gets answered over the next 3 quarters of the event?
That's tricky. I think that there are some really interesting notions and ideas that are being thrown around interchangeably that I think we actually need to tease out and play with a little bit more. So there are sort of notions of collaboration that is being interchanged with crowdsourcing and sort of more social behaviors. I think there's also this really interesting notion of sort of how we've gotten too far away from outsourcing, but the interconnections between outsourcing, crowdsourcing, and hyper-specialization, which tend to have very different consequences and outcomes, and but are so based on similarities. And so, can we tease out what are the actual differences to understand where they are relevant and where they're not relevant to achieving the outcomes that we want to achieve? So that's an area that I'm interested in learning more about in the next 2 days. But I don't know if it's exactly a question that has yet to be raised.
I think it's a great point because I do think that in many cases there's a lack of clarity around the words we use, and we do use things interchangeably, and in the process we actually dilute its meaning and loses its power.